Let's say if we have cosine of 2x is equal to root 2 over 2. How do you solve this? So one thing you can do is, all right, you might be able to do, let's say, cosine of x is equal to root 2 over 2, right? And you can do this equation using the unit circle. So how can we get cosine of 2x and all of this to look something like this, where, it's simpler? What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a substitution. I'm going to let u be equal to 2x. So we're going to have cosine of u be equal to root 2 over 2. And now we can do this using the unit circle, right? Remember that cosine represents the x value, right? So when you create an angle, right, it's going to hit this point right over here. And cosine is basically going to represent the x value. So if I draw this like right triangle, right? I draw my angle, right? And it's going to have some sort of x value, right? It's going to hit the unit circle at some point, and the x value of this point is cosine. Now I want my cosine value to be equal to the square root of 2 over 2, right? This is going to square root of 2 over 2, right? This is going to be this length right over here. And notice how you can form two triangles, right? There's going to be two angles. There's going to be two angles where you're going to have an x value of root 2 over 2. So one angle right over here is the 45-degree angle, which is the same thing as pi over 4. And you also have 315 degrees, or that's the same thing as if you made a negative 45-degree angle. Remember the trig identity, cosine of x is equal to cosine of negative x, because of the fact that cosine is an even function. So if I have cosine of 45 giving me root 2 over 2, well, cosine of negative 45 also has to give me root 2 over 2. And cosine of negative 45 is the same thing as cosine of 315, right? It's literally the same thing, except you go counterclockwise. 315 in radians, 315 degrees. If you convert this into radians, that should be 7 pi over 4, right? Because a full rotation about the unit circle is 2 pi, right? So if I make like one whole turn, right, I create an angle, I make one whole turn around the unit circle, that's 2 pi, right? So if I go pi over 2 this way, if I go pi over 4 this way, right, then I have to have, that's the same thing as going 7 pi over 4 the other way, right, counterclockwise. Okay. So we kind of have two cases here, right? So we have cosine. We can either have u, which is in this case our answer, right? We can either have our angle be equal to pi over 4, or we can have our angle being equal to 7 pi over 4. Right? There's like two cases. It's important to know that we have to put a plus 2 pi n at kind of the end of these. And the reason why you do this is because there's actually an infinite amount of solutions to this equation, right? Because think about it. I want to find out an angle where the x value right over here of the point where this ray intersects the unit circle, with the x value, we want that to be root 2 over 2, right? But notice how for 45 degrees for this pi over 4 radians angle, we can just keep going 2 pi, right? We can just keep adding 2 pi around the unit circle, and notice how we keep landing on the same spot where the x value is equal to root 2 over 2, right? So technically, we could just infinitely add on 2 pi to our answer, and we'll still get the same thing. You know that n in this case has to be an integer, right? We can't let n be, let's say, like 0.7, right? Otherwise, that wouldn't work out, right? N can't be like any real number. In this case, this n right over here basically represents how many times I'm adding 2 pi around the unit circle. So I can add it 1 time, I can add it 2 times, I can add it negative 2 times, right? It doesn't matter, right? As long as n is an integer, right, then I can just keep on adding, I can multiples of 2 pi around the unit circle, and it'll work out. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set this equal to 2x. Remember, the whole reason why we did the substitution in the first place is because now we can kind of resubstitute it back, right? We found out what u values work out for this answer, right? U can either be this or u can either be this. But we know that u is equal to 2x, right? So we can just set these two things equal to each other, and now we can solve for x. So if I just divide 2 on both sides for this part, I get x is equal to pi over 8 plus pi n. And if I divide 2 on both sides for this whole equation, I'm going to get x is equal to 7 over 7 pi over 8 plus pi n. And that's going to be the answer.